Please help me welcome Sean Faulkner. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dan. Good morning.
Good morning.
And thank you guys so much for this wonderful, warm welcome. It truly is a privilege and an honor for me to be here with you. The Mass this morning was just beautiful and wonderful. And the truth is, the body and blood of Christ being with us is the most wonderful and beautiful thing that we are going to experience today. And so, just so thankful to worship here with you guys, to be here, praying that my words and presentation here may be edifying to you guys, helpful and empowering and equipping, ultimately glorifying to our Lord. And so, I'll jump right in. We'll get started here. This can be a mysterious and scary place to go. The teenage brain, right? And there is a lot of angst, as we know, that teenagers are going through, because it is a time completely for change and transition. Emerging independence is the biggest part of a teenager's world. Everything that's going on. They want autonomy, respect, but they can't really fully have it yet. They can have varying degrees of it, but it's still very dependent. And in and of itself, this is a tension and a frustration that is constant. I want to be free, I want to be an adult. And yeah, I'm really not ready to do that yet. And that is the constant dynamic for many years throughout this phase and development of life. The challenge is being treated like a child while being expected to act like an adult. Right? Be responsible, get good grades, be perfectly mature at all times. But no, you can't go watch that movie with your friends. It's just tense and frustrating, and this is the constant reality. I want to be independent so bad, and I can't fully yet. And so it's such a pivotal time as well for their identity and the formation of it. Everything is in flux, including how I see and perceive myself. Relationships make a huge impact and difference here. Especially with their peers, right? The reputation is so extremely important because there are real consequences based on how others see them. If others reject me, see me as a loser, not good enough, it can be absolutely devastating and isolating. Disapproval from peers feels like death to teens. Fitting in is everything. There's a strong need for belonging with a community as they seek the greatest needs of all of us as human beings: love, competency, and respect. Am I cared for? Do I have what it takes? Am I worthy? All of this is going on while so many other things are swirling, and it's overwhelming, quite frankly. So the teen is skillfully keen and adept at trying to perceive everything around them. How's this person seeing me? Well, what if I try this? Will people like me now? Well, what if I do this? Well, what if I find this as my label or identity? Right? Experimentation. Who do I want to be? if I act this way, will people respect me now? Will they love me now? How will they respond? Constantly seeking affirmation, validation, where I fit in. And so, we come to the picture here. The brain, as it develops naturally, biologically, goes from the back of the head towards the front and develops over time, so that in the teen years, there's still a lot of development from the middle to the front to be worked on. And this very front part, called the prefrontal cortex, is responsible for none other than... Anybody have any guess? Almost. Emotion, good guess. Any others? Decision making. Judgment, being able to see consequences. And guess what? It doesn't get fully developed until the mid-20s. And so, impulsiveness, another part of the brain called the amygdala, is shooting all this emotion to the prefrontal cortex. But in the teen years, when this isn't really developed yet, this is like dial-up internet. Who remembers that? Right? Anybody? Am I a dinosaur? So that's the processing speed that this is able to handle, but the amygdala is like broadband. Emotion. And there's nothing to inhibit. I feel, and therefore I act. And I go. And this is all going on while all these other things are going on as well. So, as much as they want independence, and we're going to talk about it in a second, that's not all bad. I know that sounds kind of scary how I just described it. There are some good that comes out of that, actually. But the reality is, teenagers do need adults with maturity, experience, people who can see the consequences, to be able to rely on that for the guidance and the support that they really do need. They might not see it that way. They don't want to need the help of adults, but they do. And so, in a very beautiful way, all of us, as ministers to youth, get to be a presence of helping along this developmental journey, identity, providing a safe place where they can be accepted, loved, and know that they're good. And it's huge. It is so huge. I mean, it makes a big difference. Teenagers, similarly, because the brakes aren't fully there, but we're driving 120 on the Autobahn, we have an idea and we cling to it and we just go. And so, when we see what on earth are these young people doing, can help us to know that this is sheer emotion and impulse. Now, clearly there's dangers to that, but the good side, because I did say there was a good side, right? Is that this is where, oftentimes for all of society, new ideas are generated and new movements come and things that can actually be very helpful. It often doesn't get there without some conflict and some challenges along the way, but there's a lot of good that does come. And so with this independence is a natural requirement to reject parents, to assert independence. You know, I was thinking about it as the gospel was being read today, how interesting that even in the life of our Lord, as the gospel said, he was 12 years old, preteen, right there. Independence. Mom and Dad are gone 3 days, and here I am. And in my mind, that's okay. And clearly, he is God, but he is also fully man, and he's going through the human development that all of us go through. And so they come back worried, right? Anxious, a wreck. Where have you been? We've been so anxious. What's up? Where'd you think I'd be? I'm here in the house of my father, right? And the beauty is because our Lord went through this very challenging stage of seeking independence, we can see our Lord in each and every one of the teens that we're working with as well. It's not that this is evil. It's not that this is wrong in any way. To see them for where they're at and to be there with them is huge. In every generation, teens need to reject their parents' ideas in favor of their own. Though this brings conflict in the home, it can actually bring positive change in society. Scientists believe that adolescent bravery has contributed mightily to the success of the human species overall. The traits that are involved there: curious, not cautious, no inhibition, flexible. All of these things in the nature of the teen brain helps to generate the new ideas of every generation. Teens are primed for exploration. They're programmed to break new ground. Even, and this is where we need to help them, at the expense of their own personal safety. And that is something that we really need to help them as adults with. And then there's the raging hormones. Tsunami, right? For a teen boy, at the age of 9, it's as if he's drinking 1 cup of testosterone a day. Like a nice cup of coffee. By the time he's 15, that turns into 20 gallons per day. His brain is swimming in testosterone, which masculinizes everything that's going on in his thoughts, in his body, and it is real. It is powerful. This is a drive of energy. The hormone itself, and this is a clarification I think can be helpful, because lest it seem too deterministic that just this biological stuff and, well, we don't have any choice. No, we do have choice and volition. The hormone itself does not cause a behavior, but the hormones raise the likeliness that under certain circumstances, certain behaviors will occur. And these hormones that are just fueling the teenager's mind and body change their reality and perceptions of themselves as now being assertive beings, sexual beings, and independent beings in the world. All right. Newsflash. No matter what our world says, girls and boys are different, right? And their brains are different, and how they perceive things, and the very lens that they're seeing things through is very different. And this gets emphasized during the teenage years as well. Girls oftentimes will be naturally inclined to focus on people and relationships, while boys are more inclined to be focused on games and objects. Males and females become reactive to different kinds of stress. girls begin to react more to relationship stresses, and boys to challenges to their authority. Relationship conflict is what drives a teen girl's stress system wild. She needs to be liked and socially connected, whereas a teen boy needs to be respected and feel that they are higher in the pecking order, that they can advance in competition. And so, knowing what the needs are and what is going on with them can help with understanding. And this is obviously the whole reason why I'm going through this, is to increase our level of understanding so that it increase our level of empathy and care. So, in the teen male brain, all these things, the genes, the hormones are kicking in to ramp up his skills for survival in a man's world. Remember, it's all about wanting to be independent, wanting to be an adult, wanting to show I can prove that I have what it takes to be a man. And for men, our self-esteem derives usually more from our ability to maintain independence from others. Whereas for women, the oxytocin and dopamine, also hormones rushing through their bodies, are driving them to connect, to bond, to talk with each other. To the same level that someone who would take hard drugs like coke or heroin is not unlike the dopamine rush that goes through the teen girl's brain in connecting with other girls. Guys, why do they always go to the bathroom together? We don't know. We would never do that, but guess what? It's to be able to talk. To talk with each other and connect. The teen girl's brain gets so well rewarded for communication that it can be a tough habit to curb when needed. I'm the father of 3 little girls, ages 5, almost 4, and 1. And as young as they are, it amazes me. Please keep me in your prayers, especially in 13 years. But there's something about this, guys, the way that we're wired, the way God has ordained the feminine genius, the masculine genius. There's reasons behind it that go very deep, that point us ultimately to Him and to love and to union and complementarity and communion. But it can be really hard when we're just one and we see the other and it just, what is going on? It doesn't make sense, right? And we get offered into the opportunity to empathize, to seek to understand from the other's point of view, from the teenager's point of view, from the other gender's point of view. Boys' hormones prime them for aggressive and territorial behaviors. In manhood, these behaviors will aid him in defending and aggressively protecting his loved ones. The masculine genius is one of protection for the rest of the family. All this aggressive energy that the teen is just experiencing for the first time does have a healthy and a good purpose to it. But he will need to learn how to control these innate impulses. It can't just be left to run wild. By the time a boy is 16, he will desperately seek autonomy from his parents. Every cell in his brain seems to cry, "Leave me alone and let me live my own life." I want to be on my own. For the female brain and experience, this self-esteem is maintained in part by the ability to sustain intimate relationships with others. Girls find it unbearably hard to cope with the feelings of being left out. Boys and girls have the same risk of depression before the hormones of puberty, but by the age of 15, girls are twice as likely to suffer from depression. And this is just important to see and to know. As we are facilitating groups of young people getting together, relating, what about the ones who might seem to be isolated? What can we do to show them that they're welcome, that they're cared for in our midst, in our church, in our ministries? And so, when the most foundational needs are not being met, teenagers, as all human beings of every stage, are resilient. They will look to find the meeting of those needs elsewhere. When we see teens acting out, drugs, alcohol, sex, all kinds of things with cutting, depression, all the social media influences of just low self-esteem, all this stuff will drive them to do things that they think will help get their needs met. There's a function for every dysfunction. What we see on the exterior is the dysfunction. Oh, no, don't do that. That's going to hurt you. But what is the need that's being expressed through that behavior? There's a function, there's something in there that this seems like it'll get my needs met. Well, the beautiful thing, church people, is that the need for love and community and connection is something that we can help provide. And it goes a long way. I mean, I'm just so proud and encouraged to see all of you and know that you're here on a Saturday willing to take this time because you do care. And the power that that has for these young people's lives is tremendous. If the needs are not being met in the family, they will seek it elsewhere. This mostly comes back to not feeling loved, cared for, seen, and needing to be. We can't expect children who are eating the rotten foods of all, there's no shortage of lies out there and just constantly being inundated. If we're feeding on that, how can we expect just healthy and wholesomeness to grow from them? And yet, if we take an apple seed and plant it in the ground, all we have to do is naturally take care of it. Give it water, sunshine, keep the pests away, and it will naturally grow into an apple tree that bears fruit and what it's supposed to. Similarly, for us as humans, if we're being filled with so much toxic influence, it's going to have an impact, but not one that is outside of the grace of God to redeem and to resurrect. And so another huge part of what we do here in the church and as youth ministers is to bring the truth of the fullness of Catholic teaching married with love and connection. It has to be truth and love together. That's the goal in all of the communication. either one at the expense of the other is going to fall short. In the name of love, we cannot want to address those things or go to that hard place and, well, it's just well, if the truth is they're in danger and they might be at risk, no, we need to address that. That needs to be things we talk about. And yet if it's just truth, this is what the Catechism says, without that love and that care and compassion, nobody's going to receive that. Nobody wants that down their throat, right? Truth and love married together is what's going to make a big difference for all these concerns that we see the youth going through. Goodness comes naturally to us. God has created us good. So goodness is foundational and evil is not. If you have a beautiful, shiny, nice new car, right? It's a great good. Evil can't try to create its own car. All evil is rust on the car, twisting, deteriorating, perverting the good. And so when we see evil, we can say, what is the good that's being sought here? And let's bring the truth of that to the forefront. The tendency towards evil is a disordering of inclinations that are themselves basically good. While the wounds of evil are not foundational, the enduring goodness of God's creation is. And from Romans 5:20, where sin increased, grace abounded all the more. So even despite the very scary reality that we see our youth faced with in society today, it's not that all is lost. There is great hope, and none of it is outside of the foundation of good that God has created. Teens, like the rest of us, make choices based on a perceived good. There's something that they see is going to help get them what they need. What needs are being expressed through the behaviors that we see? We see it as rebellion. You need to get in line. But perhaps what that need is wanting more volition. I want more trust, more freedom, more independence. That's actually a great good, right? We don't want to raise 45-year-olds who are still completely dependent on their parents. They do need to be able to assert themselves. And so, I think as far as the transition point, it might be okay to take a break here for now, but perhaps if there's time and if there might be any questions to open it up just from
Sure.
the information presented thus
This
far.
first part, it was obviously meant to be some background information and preparation, and the second part would be a bit more practical.
Yes.
But based on what you've heard so far, if there's any questions, we have about 5 minutes, and then we'll take a break if anybody has any questions or comments. Yeah.
Do girls' brains mature more quickly than boy brains?
Great question. The speed of the maturation is similar. It's really not that different. But how it matures and what's maturing varies based on the girl's wiring and brain and the boy's wiring and brain. And so certain things will come later for boys that seem more apparent for girls. Like, so as an example, the ability to communicate and express and empathize with others, girls oftentimes naturally do that, but boys can learn to do that and kind of do it over time as well. Is that making some sense?
No, it's very helpful. And I got a follow-up question. Do individual people brains mature differently in a different rate? Because sometimes my 16-year-old kids are very, very impressive. Sometimes I want to smack them. And, like, I'm not sure if that's like no. Yes, I'm not sure. But, you know.
Yeah, no, great question. Absolutely, yes. And our processing speeds are very different from each other. There's a number of factors that go into the development, even including our environment and family of origin, what we're exposed to. But yeah, there's going to be great variation there with each unique individual. Absolutely.
John, so in your first slide, you talked a lot about communication and the fact that females really thrive on that communication. And I'm sure we all could agree that clearly my generation versus my children's generation, that communication method has changed dramatically.
Yeah.
So does today's communication methods really adversely affect what you talked about as far as the connection, the bond, and the talking, not only females, but also males?
Great question. So just so everyone can hear it also, the communication and what has changed over time, how that impacts healthy development. And what we're seeing like no other time before is with a screen, right? This is where all the communication is taking place. And it's absolutely having an impact on the ability to even connect face to face, to read verbal social cues. There's been surveys done recently where a lot of teen boys and even college age students have never even asked a girl out other than through a text message. Like, don't even know how to engage and be able to do that. And so it's having significant impacts on the communication. And if there's any follow-up part of the question there.
The only follow-up is, what do you do about that?
Yeah.
It's almost like a virus. How do you combat that virus, and how do you help these kids hone these skills that are, and convince them that they're critically important?
Great. I would say within the scope of our ability as youth ministers is that when we're running functions and events, we do our best to put the screens down and engage face to face. Ideally parents in the home are going to be responsible for their own kids, to maybe have a curfew with the screens and put those things to bed. But obviously we are limited in what we're able to do as far as those kinds of things.
So you're saying parents are the problem?
all of us model to the youth, and so it does reflect to us too of if we're doing it also and our faces are in the screens the whole time, okay, what rules we want them to follow, can we do it ourselves and really model that?
Thank you.
Yeah.
To follow up with that though, you specifically said that the adolescents are the ones kind of leading the next level of our society, but yet I feel like, a lot of adults are resistant to that. And so we're all trying to make them face-to-face communicators, and are we going to be, like, is there evidence of us getting, like, trampled over in this technology because we're not embracing that better?
Yeah, great follow-up as well. There does need to be a balance because things are evolving. If we as parents and adults are not anywhere near with the technology where we're having trouble opening an email attachment, whereas the teenagers hacking into the Pentagon for fun after school, there's a significant catching up that needs to happen to at least even be able to help. And so, there is a balance. And you know what? The technology isn't all bad either. It can be used for great good. But as with every good thing, there needs to be moderation and a balance. If I don't feel comfortable engaging with another human being face to face because my entire world is on a screen, that's imbalanced. But I use screens all the time. I actually am able to do therapy online. So we at Catholic Psych have clients from all over the country, all over the world. And because of the technology, kind of a video conferencing program, I can be engaging people face to face, but through a screen. And so it is changing, and we have to kind of evolve with it in a sense, with moderation and some limits.
On that note, I think the bells are telling us it's time to break.
This next part, as Dan alluded to, is kind of dark. As you can see even from this slide, we're going to be talking about some serious stuff here. As far as the root and the cause of depression, as we've kind of already been talking about, it's often this sense that I am not seen or recognized. I do not feel loved. I do not feel honored or dignified. And this is a great injustice, right? Because every single one of us as human persons has been given immeasurable innate dignity. Whether great leader and CEO of a company, to the teenage boy who doesn't do his homework, and everyone in between, God's image is stamped onto our souls. You know, identity is a huge part. And for all of us, we can claim to so many things. Well, maybe our profession, I'm a counselor, or, okay, I do this activity, I'm an athlete, or whatever it is. But when all of that is stripped away, you know, when LeBron James or Kevin Durant can't make a layup or shoot a basketball to save their lives, when Donald Trump has all of his power and wealth stripped away, who are we fundamentally? Children of the Most High God. And that deserves the respect and dignity. And so when we don't experience that, when we don't feel worthy of that, that leaves us in a very low place, because it speaks a lie to who we actually are. And so, for teenagers who believe they need to do in order to be loved, in order to be worthy of getting the respect and dignity. No. We flip that. You are loved, period. Everything else comes from that identity. But this isn't where they're getting everywhere. And quite frankly, even from mom and dad, right? It might be seen as a very conditional operation. And not to say that some things need to be conditional, right? There are consequences to behaviors. But the love and the recognition and the honor and the dignity, unconditional. Unconditional. That's the truth. That's how God sees each and every one of us. And so, to give that kind of basic framework as to what's going on underneath it all, we get to speak the truth of God's love. Now, the specific signs, what to look out for of depression, and listed here on the screen. If you notice that a teen is withdrawing and isolating, is unusually avoiding close friends and family, is losing interest in activities they're normally interested in. Their attendance is now very sporadic, if at all, minimal. Pay attention to those who were once involved and then have now evidenced a lack of desire to be involved. That's a warning sign something's going on. Some teens talk openly about death. It's just like a common theme that keeps coming out. That's something we want to pay attention to. A focus on death. It can even fixate on very dark, content. Okay, let's gently, compassionately, but address that and kind of find out more. What's going on in this young person's life? Showing signs of despair. Teens may talk openly about how unbearable their pain is, or feeling like they're such a burden on others. Making comments of being completely hopeless, helpless, worthless. If they have the courage to be saying that out loud and to you, you can only imagine how much more that's going on internally in the mind and their own thoughts and how they see themselves. But as hard as that is, if a teen comes to you with that, it's also a great sign of how much trust has been built in that relationship and the rapport that's there. Because this isn't easy for the teens to speak up about. It takes a great deal of courage. And sometimes honoring, acknowledging, affirming even that, like, I am so proud and thankful of you for being willing to bring that up with me. Like, that might be a very different response from what they're expecting. Like, wait, you're not mad at me? Like, this is okay? And so you can be kind of empowered not to freak out yourselves, which I understand is a common reaction because it can be hard and scary sometimes. But to know that first and foremost, you can be an anchoring, calming, listening ear. Tell me more. What's going on? Just seeking understanding and bringing it out from them. The terrible things that we know go on, the school shootings and stuff. I remember back all the way to Columbine, when someone was asked, if you had 5 minutes to say something to those shooters, what would it be? What would you tell them? We're often looking for that magic bullet, like how could we change it in one conversation? And the response I remember hearing that I think was very poignant and important is, I wouldn't say anything at all. I would take all 5 of that minutes to listen because apparently no one else was. And so don't underestimate the power of being a listening ear. Okay, back to the signs here. If you become aware of substance abuse, using drugs and alcohol are often an attempt at dulling the internal pain. Or even knowing that this is harming myself and wanting to harm myself. Reckless behaviors. Taking dangerous chances. Now, as we spoke about with all the changes going on and the development of the brain, it is, generally speaking, a more reckless time of just impulsive action. But things that, are very clear to understood, this is extremely dangerous and I'm doing it anyway. Things like driving under the influence, obviously promiscuous sexual activity, things that they know there's some real dangerous consequences and I'm doing it anyway. These are definitely signs. If you notice a drastic change in appearance or dress, the way teens present themselves to the world often speaks something about what's going on inside. And so if you notice, something really different, radical in just how they're dressing, how they're presenting, can be something to consider and to look into and to perhaps talk about if you have that relationship built. Or even a lack of care for oneself, if it might be even a hygiene issue. These are signs that internally and mentally that there's some real pain and struggles going on. Also, if it's brought up, just trouble or changes with sleeping and eating habits. And certainly, if you notice significant weight change, kind of drastic where you can tell, okay, that's a sign there too. Suicide, and even I know in the news headlines over this last week, right? We hear just tragic stories, and it's very daunting, just the reality of the statistics. Among teenagers and youth under 35 years old, suicide ranks behind only accidents as the top cause of death. Teens who often end up taking their own lives often don't want to die. What they're seeking is to end the pain. It just, again, it feels so strongly, and everything is in this moment, and if this pain is just what has to be endured, I don't feel like I can take this anymore. What are my options? What can I do not to feel this awful? For you guys, if you are in the presence of a young person and they are threatening suicide, it's very important that you take any and all threats very seriously. Do not leave them alone. Stay by their side. Again, first with the listening to hear what's going on, especially if they're willing to open up. Listen. But if it's clear that they're ready to do this, you can't leave them until emergency services are called. You call 911. And as hard as it is to make that call, this is in the safety and the protection of the young person. Because of that impulsivity, again. I think, I latch on. If I'm already willing to verbalize, I'm ready to do this. Yeah, we have to take that seriously. We can't leave them alone in that moment. Call 911 or take them to the emergency room yourself. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is also a good number just to have saved in your phones, to share with the teens, have them save it in their phones, so that if they're alone and they're not in the presence of anyone else, this is a way to break the isolation and connect. And I'll read it off here. It is also there. It's 1-800-273-TALK, which is 1-800-273-8255. That's the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. I'll give you one more phone number, and it's just more local to New Jersey. So the New Jersey Suicide Prevention Hope Line. So the New Jersey Suicide Prevention Hope Line is 1-855-654-6735. And so having these conversations is not a comfortable thing to have to face. It can make us feel extremely out of our league, and the reality is, as youth ministers, you can't fix the problem. You can't be their therapist. You can't be the emergency room provider. You can't be the social worker. But you are empowered, and if they're coming to you, that means they trust you, and so you can be a help and a lifeline to bring them to the professionals and the services that they need. But doing a basic risk assessment is a good thing for you to know how to do. And so just 4 basic questions here. You're noticing these signs. You're making a note to yourself to pull the particular teen to the side for a private conversation. And don't beat around the bush. You can be direct. I'm noticing these things, and I care for you. What's going on? And to listen. And if it does come out, things are terrible. I just want to end it. Okay, let's get the severity of how much this person is really ready to act. And so these questions here, are you having suicidal ideation? Are you having these thoughts about killing yourself? Have you ever tried to? Has there been an attempt in the past? The largest indicator that someone is at current risk of suicide is that they've actually gone to the place where they've tried it before. And maybe people don't know about that. Maybe they want people to know about that. And just by asking the question, well, yeah, I did try to take a bunch of aspirin. whoa, okay. Being a listening ear, letting them talk through what they're going through. You know, if you have thought about it, how would you do it? You know, do you have a plan? If it is clear that they have thought about this, that they've attempted it before, that they have a plan, yeah, this is very serious and we need to take it very seriously. As mandated reporters in New Jersey, if you believe that this teen is a threat to harm self or others, if they talk about, I'm so angry and I'm just ready to go do this and kill them, that's also something that we have to take very seriously and to report to the local authorities. And so, if it was a matter of someone who is being threatened to be harmed and is not in your presence, the report would go to DCF, and they'll help walk you through those steps. And that resource, I think I have somewhere for DCF, but it's easy enough to find the DCF phone number and to make those reports, to have that on hand as well. If, as you're assessing that there is some internal pain and depression here, but it's not quite to this severe level, right? They're not suicidal, they don't want to take their lives, you can have that awareness. Again, the biggest and most important thing is to be a listening ear, to try and understand what it is that they're going through. But that is important then to address with the parents. You know, to start planning to have a conversation with the parents, to compassionately let the parents know that out of love for the teen, it is important to get help. You know, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, your child is making a cry for help. I'm hearing and seeing that cry. Recommend therapy. You know, don't try to be the therapist yourself. Certainly, the Catholic Psych Institute, in which I represent, is very happy to help families in need all over the country. And we are thankful to have roughly 10 therapists now on our staff who can do online sessions. And so, you know, grab my cards, you know, have that website and resource ready. We want to be there to help these families in need. So, if I haven't said it enough, and we'll get into the details here too, but first, the first and foremost thing is to listen to the teen. Hear them out first. Keep things calm. Be that steadying anchor. And then, if needed, walk them through making that call. You know, letting them know, okay, someone's going to come and do a risk assessment. You know, get all the information. Be there with them as a presence. How do you feel about me making the call to get professional emergency help? Calling also then the parents to let them know what's going on and that you have already made the call and that this is important and being addressed in this way. And again, the scope of what the youth ministers can do and what they can't do. And so that's what we're going to get in here too, the kind of the do's and don'ts. It's not your job to fix the child. You can't. It's too big. It's not your responsibility. Just like if a teen were to break an arm during a youth event, it is not your job to put the bone in place, to set the cast. That job belongs to the doctors, right? The deep emotional and psychological wounds of the teen belongs to the work of the trained professionals and the therapists. But even as right before we go into these slides, I just wanted to take a moment to perhaps even close your eyes and imagine yourself as a young person. Maybe it's even someone that you've worked with or that you know who you believe was experiencing symptoms or signs of depression. Okay? Imagine being in such a place of despair, such intense emotional pain, that the only way you could think to relieve it or to take care of it is to bypass the strongest instinct that we as humans have of self-preservation and to actually kill yourself. Like, think about what that is like. The pain and the depth of that. It's hard. It's hard to face. It's hard to go there. But the more that we can seek to empathize and understand, the more ready we're going to be when potentially faced with these real issues that are out there. I certainly hope and pray that all of this is more just for your information and that you're never in this position, obviously, certainly. And yet, there's a chance you might be. And so I want you to at least know that there are things you can do to be a help and to be empowered and equipped to feel confident to do the things that you can do, and to also honor and acknowledge the things that you can't and that are not your responsibility to. So, for a little acronym which can be helpful in just remembering things in general here: ask, care, treat, act. And so you're seeing the signs, and the first thing again is to have that conversation, to address the signs that you're seeing, and to listen. And so ask your teen if he or she is thinking of suicide. Actively listen to what they have to say. Acknowledge what you see in their behavior, their feelings, what they're saying. Don't beat around the bush. Talk about the concerns. I see this. I see you. I see the way that you're dressing. I see the marks on your body. I see, I'm hearing the things coming out of your mouth. I'm like, I care for you. Like, what's going on? And listen. The don'ts. When the teen is in that place and in that moment, this is not the time to have a debate or to try to prove a point or to make sure they know that they're wrong. No. They need to be heard and seen. And so we don't debate whether suicide is right or wrong. We don't discuss whether feelings are good or bad. The reality is that all feelings are actually neutral. All of our emotions are from God. He feels them too. What we do with them is what has the morality. But this isn't the time to, again, get into any kind of debate or to lecture. Certainly, we need to know the value of life, but this isn't the appropriate time to have that kind of information given. The care. What we do to show that we care. Let the team know that you are there for them, that you want to understand, that you are concerned for them, that you really do care. Again, this is somewhat repetitive here, but just really beating it up to make it clear. Discuss and care what's really going on. As we were talking about before, to be in the presence of someone is to interact face to face. What we model and embody for them is to give eye contact, is to show with our facial expressions, our empathy, our undivided attention. As we just went a few moments ago, as we closed our eyes and tried to enter into what that might feel like, well, if you were there in that place and you were courageous enough to talk about it, and then the person you're talking to is just, oh yeah, hold on, I'm checking my email on my phone, like, how much more would we feel in isolation? No, to be present, to pay attention, not to be distracted. Undivided attention. Care if your teen has a plan for suicide. As we talked about, that really needs to be addressed right then and there. You can't let them alone until they're in the hands of emergency care. And the care don'ts. Obviously, don't encourage him or her to do it. And also just your own reaction, that you're calm and okay with the fact that they're in this great place can really give a sense of stability, calm, and anchoring. To not be so panicked and shocked and overwhelmed yourself, but to be a steady presence. So the treat do's: obtain a professional help as soon as possible, and the don'ts: leave the teen alone or be sworn to secrecy. They might try to say, no, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to do anything, pretend I never said that. No. Okay. Again, because I love you, because I care for you, I need to make this call. I'm going to be here with you. But this is something that I have to do for your protection. And if the teen bolts in impulsivity and runs away out of your presence, you make the call. There's a limit to how much you can control, but with what's in your control, you need to report the significant stuff of what's happening. And so this is just another little acronym: don't get mad. So the things not to do: M for mad, miss or mistake the signals. We see maybe those symptoms and signs, and it's hard to want to go there and talk about it, and so the tendency could be, just brush it off or ignore it. No, don't miss it. Don't miss it if they're there. A, don't avoid the person. Remember, this comes from a longing to be connected. And disregard. Yeah, so it's a little repetitive with the acronyms, but again, to really get the points across. So the behavior of cutting is an interesting thing that is very common these days as well. So I wanted to give some time to talking about that. And it is distinct. So cutting itself is not necessarily suicidal. So it doesn't have to be quite to the same level of emergency services 911, but this does have to be a call to the parents, for sure. In fact, there's never an instance when teens are cutting or using drugs that therapy isn't needed. Like, don't be hesitant to refer when it's there. These symptoms are cries for help. The internal pain that they don't know how to express or don't feel able to communicate or process comes out through the physical manifestation of, I can at least feel this. The internal wounds are so hard that we become even sometimes numb to them. And so the physical pain on the skin, because we are, again, Catholic anthropology, embodied, body and soul merged as one. And so the pain of the soul that I, young person, don't know what to do with, and so all I can do is try to be feeling it, so at least it gives me a sense of expression. The pain comes from not feeling loved and from deep loneliness. You might feel helpless. It's natural to feel that way when you see someone experiencing this much pain and it doesn't make sense. It might even be your reaction to be initially repulsed by what you see, and or just too afraid to want to face it or address it and brush it off as attention seeking. You may be tempted not to address it because of how awkward you feel, but I just want to encourage you. This is a cry for help, and it will be a good thing to be talked about, to be addressed, to have these conversations. In regards to conversations with parents, I understand. I've done work in youth ministry myself in both Protestant and Catholic churches. We can see clearly sometimes that, wow, the parents really are the problem here. Like, this is some really rough stuff, and that's hard to see too, and it can naturally anger us and direct that anger towards the parents or the family. My encouragement that instead of getting very mad at the parents, we can be sad and mad even for the injustice, but to do our best to see the parents in light of compassion and have sympathy for them as well. God gave this child to these parents. It is rarely the case that the parents don't love their children. What are the obstacles that are getting in the way for that love to be communicated, to be given and received? There's likely things going on in the world of the parents and the family as well. Parents don't always have the language, right, of what their teens understand. And parents can take the rebellion of the teens very personally, and it can be very hard to be a parent of a teenager. Parents, as we all are fallen and imperfect, and they themselves can be selfish and lazy, right? But they also have the dignity of being a child of God. And so if that becomes apparent, that there are family issues, conflicts, things that you see that are going on, don't hesitate to recommend to the parents family therapy. That can be a very important and helpful thing as well. And so all this to say is to bring to the forefront of what we can do as youth ministers is to accompany our teens, to accompany the teens. You know, what we were just talking about is very deep stuff, and that's last stitch stuff, right? That is last resort points and last step interventions. Ideally, these signs and symptoms and things are seen way before that it doesn't get to that place. And ultimately, our goal is to give the teens what they actually need, the need for connection and healthy intimacy that's not being met when the symptoms of depression are there. And so Pope Francis speaks of this art of accompaniment. And he writes on this topic, listening in communication is an openness of heart which makes possible that closeness without which genuine spiritual encounter cannot occur. Again, the connection is huge. It's vital. They could have the catechism memorized, but if they don't feel connected in relationship and loved and cared for, it can still leave them in an extremely lonely and depressed and hurtful place. This is what I hope you guys can see as such an opportunity, because this is a huge part of what you do. You get to connect with the youth. And it doesn't have to be all that hard, really. It's just to be a presence of love and care and available. We often, again, want that quick fix, the magic bullet. But that's not often where the true healing comes. It's not just one conversation or knowing the exact right phrase to use. What the youth today often lack is healthy intimacy in their lives. Therefore, what is needed is the accompaniment of walking with them, coming alongside the youth, being willing to listen, to empathize, entering into their challenging experiences, and showing genuine care for them right where they are at. It is truly amazing how powerful it is when one who is suffering knows that they are not alone in it. You guys get to show them that. You get to show the youth that they're not alone. And ultimately, this is what our Lord has modeled for us. God's answer for evil and suffering was not to keep wiping out humanity. I mean, I guess he did that once with the flood, but not again after that. He doesn't choose to simply take all of our sufferings away, but instead his choice was to become one of us, entering into our deepest sufferings with us, accompanying us through it, feeling what we feel alongside us, stumbling down the way of the cross, and even facing our greatest fear, death itself. He allowed himself to be killed unjustly and poured out all of himself as a gift of love for us. He entered into the hardest stuff that we will ever have to face, and in his great love redeemed it, and is always redeeming it in our lives even now. Don't underestimate the power of entering into the suffering of young people you work with, for this is where you will meet Christ, in that pain, right there with them. And that can be what saves lives. That they know how much we care, that they know how much they are loved, that they know how good they are, how much their God loves them. Because we're not afraid to go there and just to listen and to empathize. And so I thank you so incredibly much for your time again and for this opportunity. We are going to open it up to questions. And I even did it before the food got here, I think. So, hey, yeah, we can at least clap for that. We can clap for that. And these are just some resources as well. So, again, I'm from Catholic Psych Institute. That's our website and the main phone number. The DCF website is second. I noticed that the Diocese of Trenton had a great resource right there. And so I'm sure you guys are probably already aware of that, but I noticed there's some really good information on that website. A lot of the information that I was giving in the talk came from these two books of The Male Brain and The Female Brain. Very interesting reads. My one disclaimer with that, the psychiatrist who writes them is not Catholic, and so there are some things that she talks about that certainly don't align with our faith, so just disclaimer there, but those are books. The Catholic Guide to Depression. The theology of the body is such a powerful truth that hopefully you are already very familiar with, but there are incredible resources if you want to check some of these things out. The Everett family, Jason and Kristalina, and this one website, chastityproject.com, has tons and tons of wonderful resources just on that one website as well. And so this will be coming to your email shortly. Thank you again, and we can open it up for questions.